Welcome back, everyone. Today, we've got not just one, but two spine chilling stories straight from Reddit that will have you questioning the people around you and even reality itself. First up, we dive into the terrifying tale of a woman who thought she found the love of her life, only to discover he was hiding a sinister secret. And then we'll explore the haunting story of a mysterious box that can bring the dead back to life, but at a horrifying cost. You don't want to miss these, so grab some popcorn, hit that like button, and make sure to subscribe if you're ready for a journey into the unknown. Let's get started. I thought my boyfriend was the love of my life until I discovered he was drugging me at night. Lately, I've been waking up still exhausted. Even if I went to bed early, I'd wake up feeling like I haven't slept in days. Trying to get out of bed for work was almost impossible, which was strange for me because I was always a high energy sort of person. A few hours of sleep and I was always good to go. I was at a loss as to what was happening. After a barrage of tests, even my doctor couldn't find anything wrong with me. The only recent change in my life was my boyfriend who had moved in, and I was sharing a bed for the first time in my life. Steven was the first love of my life, and this was my first serious relationship. I didn't want to spoil things by making him sleep in the spare room. I liked having Steven around. He made a real fuss over me, and he would bring me chamomile tea every night before bed. The pain in my hip was sharp and pulsated up the right side of my body. I jumped from my bed and nearly collapsed to the floor as I struggled to get to the bathroom. "Steven, can you get in here?" I cried. A big dark bruise covered my hip as if I was assaulted in my sleep with a metal bar. "What's wrong?" Steven said as he came rushing into the bathroom. "Did I fall out of bed or something?" Steven had a weird expression on his face. I could swear he looked guilty about something. Probably, I don't know. His response was dismissive, which sent my brain spiraling with all sorts of thoughts. "This is not normal, Steven. I think there's something wrong with me." "You should probably see a doctor then," he coldly said before quickly leaving the bathroom. My doctor was still at a loss and suggested I should see someone who could rule out anything nefarious. Steven was still dismissive of me as we drove to the hospital. "I'm sure it's nothing. You're probably just stressed from work." People don't wake up with bruises, overstress, I angrily thought to myself. The doctor at the hospital took my blood and did all sorts of tests on me, including a stress test. I should have been happy when the test came back clear, but it only made me feel like I was losing my mind. Something was definitely wrong with me. "I would prescribe you sedatives, but your blood work shows you are already on nitrazepam," explained the doctor. I was dumbstruck and wasn't sure what the doctor was talking about. I've never taken so much as a painkiller in my life. The doctor's face looked how I felt. He took out his charts and looked over them again. "No, you definitely tested positive for nitrazepam, which is a powerful sedative." Later that evening, as I sat in bed, a million different thoughts ran through my head. How was that even possible? I thought to myself. As I sat there, Steven walked in with my chamomile tea, and just as I was about to put it to my lips, I was struck by the most unnerving thought. The realization that my boyfriend was drugging me hit me like a ton of bricks and filled me with a dread I had never felt before. I emptied the contents of the cup down the sink in the bathroom before jumping back into bed. "Was it hot enough for you?" asked Steven as he jumped into bed beside me. "Perfect as always." I felt as if I was lying beside a complete stranger. Had I ever really known him? I thought to myself as I lay there terrified he was doing unimaginable things to me while I slept. I must have drifted off at some stage because when I woke up, the room was a mess and Steven was nowhere to be seen. My body ached all over and it felt like I was in a fight. What the hell was he doing to me in my sleep? I thought. I had made the decision to go to the police, but I needed evidence. Or it was just my word against his. I had purchased a hidden camera and set it up in the bedroom, pointing it towards the bed. I woke up exhausted as usual, which unfortunately meant you had done something to me while I slept, but I had it on camera. I opened my laptop to check the footage. For the first couple of hours of sleep, nothing happened. For a moment I had hoped I was imagining everything until I watched myself jolt from the bed. At first I couldn't believe what I was doing. It felt like I was watching a horror movie as I watched myself crawl up the bedroom wall like some possessed demon. I continued to crawl up the wall onto the ceiling, looking down over Stephen like I was ready to pounce on him. Stephen woke, and it was strange watching him because it was like he was prepared for what was happening and didn't seem fazed by it. He took a stick out from under the bed as I pounced from the ceiling above, and he spent the next hour fighting me off. I watched as he subdued me on the bed before pulling out handcuffs and cuffing me to the bed. I looked at the marks on my wrists, which made sense now. As soon as Stephen came home from work, I ran and threw my arms around him. "Why didn't you tell me what you were going through every night?" Stephen shrugged his shoulders. "I thought you knew, and usually the drugs I was giving you made things a little easier. Why are you even still with me? My last girlfriend was a jealous psychopath. You're a walk in the park compared to her." Wow, that first story really makes you wonder just how well you know the people closest to you. Trust is a fragile thing, and sometimes the truth is more terrifying than any nightmare. But if you thought that was unsettling, our next story takes a whole new twist on the concept of life and death. Imagine a box that can bring back your loved ones. Sounds like a dream come true, right? But as they say, be careful what you wish for. Let's dive into this eerie tale and see what happens when the line between life and death gets blurred in the most disturbing way. My dad has a box that brings people back to life, and it has made him rich. The box had the power to bring people back from the dead, and it had made my dad very rich. This is going to be yours one day, so you need to listen and pay attention to everything I say and do. The box was a plain maple box with no markings, but it had a smell which was hard to describe. It smelled like something from a childhood, sweet, like cotton candy or freshly made waffles. The clients were siblings who never got to be by their father's bedside when he passed. They lived overseas, and it was too late by the time they made it back. All they wanted to do was say goodbye to him one more time, and they were willing to pay a lot to do it. For the box to work, my dad would place a recent photo, the clothes the deceased were wearing when they died, and a precious personal item into the box. "We brought what you asked us to bring." They handed my father a picture of the siblings and their father, which was taken the last time they were all together before he died. They then handed him a gold watch, which they said he had since he was a young man and never took off his hand. My dad placed the items in the box, along with what he was wearing the day he died. I wasn't sure what was going to happen next, but I could feel the beating of my heart as we stood there waiting in silence. Suddenly, a tapping sound could be heard coming from the box. It knocked 3 times before my father opened the lid. The old man looked confused at first, but when he saw the smiling faces of his kids, his eyes lit up. They spent the next 2 hours alone in a room together. I watched as my dad kept a close eye on my watch. "Why do they only get 2 hours?" I asked. "It's the rules, son," my father said abruptly. My father ushered the brother and sister of the dead man from the room. They looked devastated having to say goodbye, but at least they got to finally say it. My first experience with the dead was a strange moment for me. It was terrifying, but also kind of sweet. It was seeing the faces of the grieving families light up as they got to hug their dearly departed one more time. When it comes to the death of a child, parents would empty their bank accounts for a chance to hug their child one last time. The grief-stricken couple had traveled from the other side of the world. The pain of losing their child from a freak accident was etched into their faces. "Did you bring what I asked you to?" my dad softly asked. "This was his favorite toy. He never went anywhere without it," explained the woman. My dad placed all the items in the box before ushering the couple into another. Everyone waited with nervous apprehension. Suddenly, the smell of warm memories filled the room as the box started to shake. My dad walked over and took the lid of the box, and a fresh-faced, blonde-haired boy was smiling up at us. His blue eyes were bright and radiant, and he smelled like a newborn baby. "Mommy, Daddy," beamed the young boy as his parents embraced him. My dad kept a close eye on his watch as we sat in the next room. "I hate this part," said my dad with a sullen look on his face. When we entered the room, the smell of a newborn baby was replaced by the stench of rotten meat. The boy's radiant blue eyes were now black as coal, and his face deathly pale. "We explained the rules, Mrs. Jefferson. It's time," my dad said as he quickly ushered the boy's crying parents from the room. My dad left me alone in the room with the boy. I watched in horror as the boy screamed in immense pain as his bones contorted and snapped. I remembered the boy's parents telling us he died from multiple fractures when a bookcase in the family home fell on him. The boy's face contorted in agony as he began to crawl unnaturally towards me. My body went stiff with fear as his hands pulled on the end of my jeans. All I wanted to do was scream, but I couldn't make a sound. Suddenly, my dad ran into the room and pulled the dead boy off me. The whole process didn't sit right with me. Watching that poor boy squirm in agony was a sight I never wanted to see again. After the parents had left, my dad picked up the boy as he cried for his parents and carried him from the room. "What are you going to do with him?" I asked. My dad stood silent as a look of guilt radiated from his eyes. "They're dead, son. Why does it matter?" As we stopped at a large steel door, my dad turned to me with a serious expression on his face. "You have to promise one thing. When I die someday, you will never bring me back." Something didn't sit right about the whole process, and I was starting to think my dad wasn't the good person I always thought him to be. A sense of dread crept up my spine as the smell of death hit me. He handed me the keys to the door as the dead boy in his arms continued to wail in agony. My hands were shaking with fear as I placed the key in the lock. I slowly opened the door, and the sound of agonizing screams was deafening. The room was filled with hundreds of moaning and wailing corpses, some calling out for their loved ones. "It doesn't feel right to just bury them," he said as he flung the dead boy like discarded rubbish into the pile of the living dead. And that's it for today's chilling tales. If these stories left you with goosebumps or a sense of unease, you're definitely not alone. The line between reality and horror can be disturbingly thin, and these stories prove just that. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends who love a good scare, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We've got more spine-tingling stories on the way, and you won't want to miss them. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the scariest things are the ones we can't see.